How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Artisans of Steel podcast. My name is Marco Malamasi. I'm here to talk and share conversations with some of the most talented makers I'm aware of, and know have the great fortune and to know and be able to call friends and be able to pull in for these conversations so we can get their stories, we can get their background, how they got into knife making, some of their approaches and techniques maybe. But I think what's really important is just kind of just documenting these various stories. There aren't a lot of places doing that, and I think this is a great place for that to happen. So, but before we get into our conversation with our a guest today, Mr. Owen Wood, we're going to talk about our sponsors really quick from the Patreon. And if you want to support over on the Patreon, where you get to see these conversations first, and live, so you could be part of the conversation and talk with these esteemed makers as well, and ask questions as we're carrying the conversation, um, then just go over to the Patreon. If you sign up at the illuminated individual level, that will give you all kinds of access, or the illuminated individual level or higher, that will give you all kinds of access to especially these live Q&As, or I guess the private Q&As that live on the Patreon, as well as these live conversations, again, where you get a chance to interact with these very talented individuals. And so our super sponsors for this month are first, Russell Tinsley of Ouzel Finch Beers. He's on Instagram at Ouzel Finch Beers, as well as Can't Make Knives, which is a little bit of a misnomer these days. He's been taking classes. He's doing great work. And also the at Nost, which is Nost Brewing Project. He's based out of Virginia. He's a great guy. I was just at the Wirtz Machine Works hammering, actually, with our guest today. And Russell was kind enough to send some samples of some of his brews down to sorry, I just heard the door, so I didn't know what's going on. Down to the event, and they were very well received, especially the boozy sodas, I guess, or what they're called. They had like orange and lime and grape, and it reminded me of the sodas that I would drink as a child. But they're made for grown-ups, basically, with a little bit of alcohol content to them. They are very delicious. They are very creative brewers, doing all kinds of really kind of wild and out of the box beer styles, and as well as nostalgic beers, hence the Nost Brewing Project. Nost refers to nostalgia, and so essentially they're brewing the beers that maybe you first drank when you tried beer for the first time, but they're made from high quality ingredients, so they have just a higher level of flavor and deliciousness, and I absolutely love them. And I was very thankful to get to drink some of those again, while at the Words Machine where it's hammering. Uh, and then next we have Dan Hubbs of 66 Mountain Knives. He's on Instagram and Facebook at 66 Mountain Knives. Great guy. He took my class last September. He's been putting all that work, especially around mosaic Damascus design and welding, he's putting that knowledge that he got from that class to work, and he's making some really great EDCs. If you go check out his Instagram at 66 Mountain Knives, you'll see some of his more recent work since the class. His work was already good at up to this point before taking the class, but it's just that next level of understanding, especially in regards to pattern design and stuff like that, has really kind of just taken his work to another level. And he's doing an excellent job getting great finishes, really making some very cool kind of, I guess, pattern movement and line manipulation. He's getting some really great activity in his blades, and so go give him a follow at 66 Mountain Knives. And then we have Mr. Lawrence Lake of Maritime Knife Supply. Maritime Knife Supply is a knife supplier, it's in the name, based out of Atlantic, Canada. You can find them on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Maritime Knife Supply. You can also find them online at maritimenifesupply.com. They ship not only throughout Canada, but throughout the United States as well. And so if you are a U.S. Based knife maker, don't hesitate to reach out to them and get your knife making materials from them. I actually just bought a load of belts, and I'm super psyched to get those put to work because I got a lot of grinding in front of me. But Lawrence is also a great guy. You see him at the shows every once in a while, and other maker events like Maker Camp up in New England. And he's always got some fun little things to hand out and give people. So if you see him, make sure you say what's up. He's a great guy. All right, so next we have Gabe Fletcher of Anchorage Brewing. He's at Anchorage Brewing on Instagram, as well as at Anchorage Forge, which is his forging page. Anchorage Brewing is a phenomenal and award-winning brewery based out of Anchorage, Alaska. They make some of the best of beers I've ever tasted in my life. I haven't had a bad beer from them. I love all the complex things that Gabe is doing, especially with the triple age, the double age, like all these different oak barrels coming from all these different distilleries. They make some really great beers. And Gabe himself is making some great knives. I've had the fortune of going and working with him. He is definitely advancing in quite a heavy fashion. He's definitely moving and shaking in the knife industry, making some great culinary knives. He's actually just got back from doing some training with Salem Straub. Another Washington knife maker like myself, and he's already putting some of those new lessons to work. He's doing some good stuff, so go give him a follow on Instagram. Again, at Anchorage Brewing, which is his brewery page, or at Anchorage Forge, which is his maker page. Also, he's got a really cool collaboration beer coming out with Ben Kamon, who was a previous guest here on the Artisans of Steel podcast. It's Gabe's steel and Ben's style of knife making. It's really cool, and they also have a beer collab that they're going to be releasing also. So keep an eye on both the Instagrams for those things coming available. All right, next is Eric Kidwell. Eric, I got to hang out again with him at the Warts Machine Works hammering. He's kind of the point man especially for all the presentations, making sure there's video footage so that people can see everything that's going on. Because unfortunately, when it comes to forging, there's only so much room around an anvil. So one of those people is him with a camera that broadcasts to another television and a more open space where people can watch the demonstrations from over there. He's also a great guy. He was on top of just whatever I needed in regards to support or just a chat or I was doing all kinds of drawings on white paper on whiteboards and paper and stuff like that, and so he was just always right there to help. He's also just a good guy in general, and he's still working on getting his shop together, but when he does, he's going to be rock and rolling, doing some good work. He's based I believe he's based over in Maryland in the DC area. So he's a good guy and he's a good follow. Go follow him on Instagram at District 202 LLC. And then finally, we have Josh A. Weston. He's Josh A. Weston on Instagram. And he's also part of the Dragon Forge Experience, which is on Instagram at Dragon Forge EXP. So they cruise around to different Renaissance festivals, and they've fabricated these very elaborate forges that look like full grown winged dragons that you are forging out of the opening of their mouths, and it creates a really incredible experience for these people that are coming to these Renaissance festivals, and seeing metal being forged probably for the first time, as well as doing it themselves for the first time. So if you want to know where they're going to be next, go check them out again on Instagram, Dragon Forge EXP. Josh also on his personal page, he's been making a lot of I think they look like challenge coins, but he's doing a lot of laser work lately. So I'm interested to see where he's going with all this laser work that he's doing. And he's casting like his own little ingots and pucks that he's then doing the laser work on. He's very creative, very artistic. So all the designs are also his as well. And so if you want to see more of that, you just got to go over to his Instagram. Again, it's Josh A. Weston on Instagram. Okay, so our guest today is a very talented maker who has been in the industry and has been a custom knife maker for a very long time. I think he has a wealth of knowledge and wisdom to share with us. He hails from South Africa originally. He now lives in the United States, and I'm really excited to get to know his journey because I think became aware of his work gosh, I can't even remember when, but it's been quite a few years. I think I'd probably seen his work, but not known who he was. But I think it was our mutual friend, Mike Quisenberry, who first really turned me on to what Owen is doing, especially in regards to his precision welding of Damascus materials. And I can't wait to get into that conversation a little bit more and to understand his approach and to share that with you guys as well. He also just recently demonstrated that at the Hammer-In. And he just, like, on top of that, he's just a great designer of these folding blades. And without further ado, I'll just stop talking and I'm going to bring him in here. Owen, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Excellent. How's the weather down in Texas, sir?
Texas is a beautiful day today. I was out in the state park with my kids riding bikes. Not my kids, my grandkids riding
Beautiful.
bikes, and they had a blast. So it's a beautiful day here. Beautiful spring day. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's great.
And you guys up there?
It's down to yesterday was all right. It started out a little dreary and then it got sunny, and then today it's just been a little dreary all day. But fortunately I've been in the house most of the day recording and doing drawings and all kinds of stuff for the knife making business. So I want to get started just to kind of get a bit of your background. Again, I mentioned you're originally from South Africa, and what part of South Africa I don't know, but I'd be curious to just understand, like, what early childhood was kind of leading up into adulthood, and like, are you an only child? What kind of work did your parents do? Like, what are the things that kind of have molded you to eventually become the person you are from early childhood on?
Well, have you got an hour and a half?
We got it. We got time. We got as much time as you want.
No. My mom and dad were both South Africans. My grandfather on my father's side came from Australia.
Okay.
And on my mother's side, they were more all directly from England, but they were both born in South Africa. I was born there in 1951, just after the war. My dad flew DC-3s up in the desert with the South African Air Force, which was really, I guess, a branch of the Royal Air Force. Well, they probably don't like me describing it like that, but it really was. Okay. And he was an engineer, chemical engineer. Grew up in a white collar background in a white collar suburb in Johannesburg, which is sort of in the central highlands of South Africa, 5,000 above sea level.
Oh wow!
But close to the
tropic. That.
Yep, high up, close to the Tropic of Capricorn, only about 200 kilometers south of Capricorn.
Oh wow!
So, yeah. What more? So it was an interesting life. I don't want to really get into the politics of South Africa.
Sure, that's fine.
That's for another discussion.
Yep.
I think my dad loved woodworking. Loved working with his hands. So he would, go off to work, and over the weekends he'd always be involved in projects in the house, woodworking projects. So from a very early age, I got involved in woodworking. And so I loved making things.
Sure.
And when it finally came to us white collar kids in South Africa were expected to go off to university, get a degree, and manage other people, not get our hands dirty ourselves. And I tried that route, and I just really wasn't comfortable. And it took a lot of time for me to pick up the courage to push back, not only against my parents, but there's social pressure to go to university and do those things and say, hey, I've spent a couple of years at university. I enjoyed my studies, but I just had no deep interest in them. I really wanted to make things. So that's kind of where the push came from, to push back against my dad and say no in the end. So I was about 28 by the time I said no more.
Sure.
I'm going to go and do my own thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Was woodworking a major outlet for you when it came to creativity? I mean, you're obviously very creative and your design work and artistic. How did that manifest early on as well?
Okay.
I'm always curious about that.
So
Was that in woodworking, or would you do drawings or?
no, I think I worked directly out of my head into a table.
Oh, okay.
Envisage it and maybe make some rough sketches with some figures on them, dimensions on them. And quite honestly, Mareko, I can't remember.
Okay.
But I know I made cupboards in my bedroom. I made bunk beds that were built in. I made pulled out windows in the house. And bear in mind that in South Africa, everything is mortar and brick and mortar. There's no, so if you take a window out, you're breaking bricks, etc. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
and replace them. Made my own wooden windows and all kinds of stuff like that.
Wow.
But I think
Okay.
the real so Dad had no metalworking tools in the workshop at all.
Okay.
So we had no ability to weld. We had no ability to turn anything. We had no ability to fabricate in metal at all. And then I need to add in that we were a hunting family, in that we loved our shotguns, and
Okay.
from a very early age, I was out with Dad shooting guinea hens and francolin and partridge and duck and geese.
Okay.
And I think I was must have been about 12 or 13 when he brought back an old side-by-side shotgun from England for me, made by a company called Greener that's quite famous.
Okay.
And it had originally been a Damascus barreled gun.
Okay.
And they'd rebarreled it, and when they rebarreled it, one of the barrels was off center.
Oh.
So the firing pin would not strike the primer right in the middle. And that caused problems with misfires. And one camping weekend when we were shooting, I just got so frustrated with the misfires. I went home, I took the whole firearm apart, and I took the action and put it in a drill in a vise in the drill press, and I drilled a 3/16 hole right through where the firing pin is. And then I took a file and a piece of steel, and I put it in the chuck of the drill press, and I filed it to the right diameter, and I stuck it in this hole, and silver soldered in place. Hard silver solder, high temperature silver solder.
Right.
And that was my first metalworking project.
Okay.
And then I had to rearrange, find the new center for that firing pin, move it over, and that shotgun I still use today.
No, for
Yeah,
real?
still goes. Yes.
How old were you when you made that change without any background or
I
experience? You
was
just
still at
went for it.
school, so it was 15 or something like that.
That's pretty cool. That is a audacious little kid, I'd say,
Yes.
saying, "I'm just gonna get this fixed. I'm gonna fix this myself."
Yeah, I think I probably did it when Dad was at work, because if he had not been in work, he would have stopped me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right, for
Yeah.
fear that you were probably gonna make the gun worse rather
Yep.
than fix it. And so
Yeah.
what did he think after you fixed it? After you fixed it?
I think he was pretty impressed. I
Nice.
think he was impressed and realized, here's something. But then, as I say, I was still at school.
Right.
Yeah, and then that what took me over into knife making when I was at college. In college, I met a guy called Des Horn, and a lot of people will know Des Horn. He comes to a lot of shows here still, and he's a dental student, and he was working his way through dental college by making knives. And he knew, I think it was A.G. Russell, knew some of the guys here. He'd met them and talked to them on the phone. And he was making knives there, and he was grinding them out of giant hacksaw blades. In the old days, when you had these mechanical hacksaws with a blade that was sort of 4 inches wide.
Okay.
And maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, he would take those, and they were high-speed steel, and they would be differentially hardened. The back was hardened, and the cutting edge was hardened, and it had a soft centered piece. And he would cut his knife out so that the backbone of the blade came out of the soft part, and the cutting edge came out of the hard part, and then grind on stones.
Oh my God.
Yeah, grind on stones. There we go. So I met Des, and I was busy refurbishing my grandfather's shotgun case. I'm sure a lot of guys will be familiar with these old British shotgun cases, leather and wood cases with all the little compartments for the parts of the shotgun, and oil bottles and that kind of thing. And all the felt had worn away, and I was redoing it. I thought it would be pretty cool to put a knife in there and get a nice piece of walnut and make a handle for it out of something similar to the stock of the shotgun. Yeah. And I went to Des and asked him to help me. And he said, no. He said, but I'll show you how to do it.
Okay.
So that's how the first knife came about.
Interesting. And what year was that? Do you remember?
That was 1971.
71. Okay.
Yeah. So I made my first knife. And the very first one was made out of a file. I was hard grounded on stones out of a file. Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard a lot of people say their first knife was from a file that they just ground on with probably like a bench grinder or something like that.
Yeah.
Were there a lot of knife makers, or like what did the knife industry look like at the time? Was knife making a thing, and how did Des decide that he could make a living from making knives, for that to then be something that inspired you in your process?
I think Des was making a living out of dentistry.
Okay.
And yeah, and he and a group of us later went on to build a 9mm pistol that he still has and uses, based off a Browning high power.
Okay.
With some modifications. So at that stage, I mean, it was just Des, and I think he was following the beginnings of the knife making industry here in the United States.
I see.
I can't remember when Blade magazine first started. Anybody got any ideas?
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody could probably Google that pretty quick, but
yeah, I think you might have seen something like that. But you know, dentists are very into materials, so he was very much into his steels, etc., etc. He knew a lot about metallurgy, and so I think that's more what drove him. And he was paying some of his student fees off. I don't think he was making a living out of it. And I don't think there was much other knife making activity at that stage in South Africa. I think it developed around about 75, 76. It really began to get going.
Interesting. Okay. And so at the time, what did, I guess, more when Des was doing it, and I guess also when you started doing making. So sorry, let me back up. So 71 was the first time you were kind of introduced to handmade knives, and you were building that knife to go with the shotgun case.
Yes.
And then a few years, I'm sure, go by. Like, when do you go full time or start doing it more frequently, or making a business from it? And then what does it look like? Even like, are you selling to across, like, overseas to the United States, or are you selling to people there in South Africa? Are they mostly hunting knives, Bowie knives? What do they look like?
So come done with college, and I take myself off and join a company called Forest Engineering, who imported machine tools. Interested in making things. So South Africa did not have a machine tool industry of its own, so they imported stuff from all over the world. Mainly European, some American, mainly European stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where I got my taste for machines, and then knife making became more of a hobby. And I was talking to various, obviously being involved in selling machines, buying and selling machines, you get to talk to a lot of people who are in the machining industry, and talking to people from 3Ms. They persuaded me to start building a grinder to grind knives. So I built this giant grinder with two 10-inch by 3-inch contra-rotating wheels.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And backstand idlers. We didn't build anything like the TW90. These were
Oh,
big, heavy machines. Yeah.
right.
And pretty soon after that, realized that wasn't going to work, and just started to grind on the wheels, on one wheel rather than on two. And
Sure.
it had to be around that stage that we were beginning to get more information from the States. I can distinctly remember the huge bump up in quality when Bob Loveless's book, How to Make Knives,
Oh,
became available.
okay.
And when that came out, then the whole world changed. All of a sudden,
Right.
we had ideas in our heads, and so that was around 1978. Got married in 1979, and a new men's magazine, outdoor men's magazine, hunting, all kinds of outdoor stuff had just started, and they wrote an article on my knives, and
Oh, wow.
they were hunting knives and some daggers, and that set me up for a year of work.
Oh,
And,
holy
and
smokes.
and my wife and I discussed and said, well, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
So I dropped my job and started making knives.
And your day job again while you're doing the knives as a hobby was like machine sales.
Machine sales, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Cool. So then, okay. So with hunters and daggers, you start going full time. What happens next? How does that year go?
Yeah, that year went fine. At the same time, my dad and brother were involved, and we bought about 30 acres, a 30-acre property, and we were building houses and building workshops, and so it was very much mixed, but the knives were still what I needed to keep me alive.
Right.
Yeah, and so they and I must admit, my wife was teaching, but then by
Okay.
1981, she was pregnant, and our daughter was born, and in 1980, that was, and in 1982, I needed to make some more money, so I decided that I would come to the States to a guild show. So we
Oh,
came to Kansas City, the guild show in 1982,
right.
and that was quite an experience.
Well, tell me about it because I feel like what I've seen from old editions of like Blade magazine and Knife World magazine and even the OKCA Oregon Knife Collectors Association newsletters. It's very, I feel like I just remember seeing a lot of men in suits and very big cowboy hats and so what was the industry like at that time? And you hadn't moved here, you traveled
Yeah.
abroad
I
to
traveled.
sell,
Yeah,
and then the plan was to come back, right?
flew 17 hours from Johannesburg to New York City. Sold my 1911
Oh no.
Colt in order to finance the first trip over.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, flew to New York, uh, and then flew to Kansas City. From there, I did come with another South African who was interested in starting a supply business in South Africa for knife
Okay.
makers. Yeah,
Sure.
and had uh, a not a hugely successful show. I was
Okay.
arrogant and young and thought, here was this guy from Africa. I would be different. I would have all kinds of different African materials, which we did have.
Right.
I mean, we had water ivory and hippo ivory and ordinary ivory, because in those days there was no issue with those
Sure.
materials, and some super nice woods, and then Cape buffalo horn,
Right.
and other antelope horn, and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, I see. So you came over with not just with knives, but with all kinds of materials and supplies that people could
No,
be
no,
making.
I didn't. I just came, but I had handled the knives in all these different
Oh, okay.
materials.
I
And
got you.
by
I got you.
that time, my wife was doing some scrimshaw too, so I had some scrimshaw
Oh,
pieces with animal scrimshaw on them. And well, the long and short of it was that I had brought a zebra skin with me to cover my table. and I had to sell the zebra skin in order to make ends meet and get myself
Oh.
home. And but I took some orders and was invited to go to the New York Custom Knife Show.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good.
The following November.
Yeah.
Run by a New York collectors group, a group of collectors in New York.
Yeah.
So the following year, I went to New York, and then things really took off.
That's great. What was it about that show that helped? I mean, had your knife making changed much between the Kansas City show and the New York
No,
show?
still fixed blades.
Yeah.
Yeah, still fixed blades. Still trying to be really a little different, a little African with my own hunting knife designs, with things like elephant hide sheaths.
Yeah.
And lots of ivory, and nice ivory. Not the white ivory, the nice ivory from the outside of the tusks.
Okay.
Yeah, and then of course we started to see. Well, no, it would have been later on that we started to see mammoth ivory coming in.
Okay.
But yeah, the following show, I was awarded best of show in New York.
So the second time that you were, or the first time, or the second time you were
second
in New York?
time. Second time.
Wow.
Yeah, so I won Best Knife Maker award, which I don't think I really deserved, but I think they were just being kind to me.
Oh,
And,
really? Why do you say that? Why do you think that?
well, there were some pretty good knife makers there.
Sure.
I mean, T.M. Dowell was there, and I don't think Bob Lovelace was there. I met Bob Lovelace in 1982 in Kansas City.
Okay.
I remember meeting him there. Yeah, and George Heron, who was later guild president at the time.
Mhm.
Steve Delac.
Oh, yeah.
There, yeah. Lots.
Yeah.
Good memories. Yep.
Crazy. Cool.
But
So,
I
go ahead.
suppose the things that you really remember about that is, I sold some knives. I made some good money. I was told, don't go out on the streets alone at night in New York. After come back by 10 o'clock. Make sure there are 2 or 3 of you at least.
Right.
And then, of course, the mayor changed, and everything by 1983, everything's just started changing there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so at the same time, so the materials that you're making your knives out of, are you making damascus yet, or no?
No,
It was all
stainless,
monosteel.
all stainless.
Oh, stainless. Okay.
All mainly ATS 34 and D2.
Okay.
In those days, yeah.
Yeah.
By that time, we progressed to. We didn't didn't do my own heat treating.
Okay.
Heat treating went out to vacuum for vacuum hardening in those days. Yeah.
Right. That's fair.
And then in 1984, we had the New York show was in the underground parking lot of.
It was in a parking lot.
Parking garage.
Oh,
Underground parking garage of Madison Square Gardens.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I was sitting next to a guy called Sid Burt. And nobody knows who Sid Burt is anymore, but he was making a lot of Damascus and doing some fantastic work. And if you go back to Jim Wyer's Points of Interest books, for those of you who haven't seen them, Jim Wyer, W-Y-E-R, he was the photographer in those days, the knife photographer, and he made these wonderful, for that time, coffee table books about knives.
Oh, and wow.
If you go back to the first ones, if you can find them, have a look at his work. Man, just magnificent work. People would be proud to be doing that kind of work today.
Interesting. You said Sid?
Battle axes and... Sorry?
Sid, what was Sid's last name?
B-I-R-T. Burt.
Sid Burt. Interesting.
So Sid and I sat next to one another, and by the end of the show, he had invited me to go and spend a week with him the following year. So the following year, I got to forge my first Damascus.
Wow.
So that would have been 1985.
85.
Yeah.
I was 1 year old.
You were 1 year old. Okay.
Not trying to age you or anything.
No.
I'm aging myself. I was just a little baby.
And
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. It says it was a wonderful trip. I can remember. I mean, what did I know about forging? I knew nothing whatsoever. So I pitched up flew back to Indiana after the show in November, and well, pair of jeans and sneakers, and here he was with a little giant forging on the first day, and he spent the first day just showing me how to forge basic laminations.
Sure.
And then the second day he said, okay, the forge is yours, I'm going to my other shop, you do what you need to do. Here's the material, make some steel, if you need me, come and call me.
Right.
And I can remember spoonfuls of flux. Yeah.
Is that different from what you do now?
It is. Yeah, flux sucks. Oh, I hate flux. I don't like flux anywhere near what I'm doing.
But you were spooning it on then.
We were.
That was the way, right?
That was the way. And I can remember looking down. I was concentrating on forging out this bit and looking down, and my sneaker was on fire.
Oh, crap.
And I put my foot in the barrel of water and went on forging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wild. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine doing that now. Inviting somebody to come over and then just letting them loose in the shop.
Let them loose, yeah.
Wow.
And the best way to learn. I mean, sure. I went back to South Africa with a bar of 100-layer Damascus.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Were there many other South Africans making Damascus?
None.
At that time?
None. And not even, I guess, I was probably the first, you know, and you always got to be careful.
Sure.
I think I was the first South African, not that it's a big deal.
To the best of your knowledge.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge. Yep. Then, of course, I had to go home and start equipping myself.
Right.
Yeah.
So then where do you find a power hammer in South Africa?
So I got a nice story about that. I had a client who was had a lot of government contracts, defense contracts, big fencing projects. It was a fencing company, and he had bought several sets of knives from me. And he had bought one and hadn't fully paid for it. And I was mad with him because he was really dragging it out. And one day his secretary called me and said, you know, this company is going under. If you come here and sneak in, I'm going to make sure you get paid.
Oh, wow.
So, and I always got lost looking for this. Within a big industrial complex, I got lost looking for this company. And I saw, by then I'd been researching hammers. Sure. And having been in the machine tool industry, I knew exactly what an air hammer was. So that's what I was looking for. And I saw this big black object lying behind a factory in the long grass. And I said, you know, I know what that thing is.
Oh.
So I went and I got my money from this company, and I went back, and there was a Nazel 1B.
No. Okay.
Yep, in Africa, a Nazel 1B. So
wow.
I then had to, you know, I never picked up anything so heavy in my life before. So I had to work out how to lift this thing and get a trailer that I could put it on.
Right.
And the anvil was, the dovetail on the anvil had been broken out. So I had to find a company to machine a new dovetail into that, and then make a riser block.
Yep.
And this is another funny story. Everybody should laugh at me over this one. Okay. I started doing. So we got it all back to the farm, and finally, after about, I suppose it was about 2 years, I was ready to get this thing on a foundation and start making steel. Right. And I had been researching for air hammer foundations, and I, you know, gone to the Portland Cement Institute, all kinds of things like that, trying to find documentation. And there is a lot out there, but most of it is for huge hammers.
I got you.
For really big stuff where it counts. And some of you will know that the Nazel 1B has the anvil is separate to the body of the hammer.
Sure.
So you have a step in the foundation. So my foundation was about 3 feet by 6 foot by 6 foot deep. Oh, so somewhere in Africa, there's this huge block of concrete. Because that hammer came to America with me.
Oh, okay, came with you. Wow, cool. What is the rating on the 1B?
It's a 100-pound hammer.
100-pound. Oh, that's great. That's perfect. I love a 100-pound hammer.
Oh man, and sadly, you know, when a little bit down the road, when we were settled in America, it was in early 2000s. I mean, we were living in the city. Kids were at school. I had a very good friend there who I'd met, who just offered me the use of his forge, and
Okay.
he had a Russian 200-pound hammer on the floor operating, and I thought, well, I've been up to and seen a Matt Whitmus rolling mill somewhere
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I figured, man, we need one of those machines. So I sold my hammer.
Okay.
Yeah, and I bought a Matt Whitmus rolling mill.
Those Whitmus rolling mills are pretty damn nice.
They are, but I'm not sure which I'd rather have.
Oh, interesting. Well,
Yeah,
so
would I want my hammer back again? Yeah, I can. Today I could make a rolling mill. I'd get out and
okay.
make one. Yeah,
Okay.
uh,
Interesting. So
yeah.
so you don't have a hammer right now?
I don't. I work
Oh,
with the press. I work with the press and the rolling mill.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
rolling mill. That's one of the tools that I would love to add to my kit. Um, that and right now a rolling mill and a sandblasting cabinet.
Oh, a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
I could do with that. I've got an itty bitty one which I decorate parts with, but
Sure.
a big one would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I reading up on you and getting to know you a little bit more through the internet. I found that I think it said 1980, you actually helped to establish and start the South African Knife Makers Guild. Is that
Yep. There were three of us,
okay?
and we had a lot of fun doing it. You know, trying to set some standards,
Sure.
and you know what a knife should look like, what it should all be about,
Right.
and yeah, we had a good time. And the guild, the South African Knife Makers Guild, shortly after we started, I think by about 1985, we were running classes already.
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah, and I know because we held them in my workshop, and on our lawn had a huge tent, and we had 20 or 30 or 40 people there,
Sure.
and a bunch of guild members just instructing
Right.
and teaching. And so the South African Guild has gone from strength to strength.
Interesting.
And it didn't get tangled up in all the politics that the guild here got involved with what is a handmade knife,
Sure.
you know, yeah,
Okay.
which was kind of the demise here, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And so I guess you were probably the de facto Damascus instructor down there.
Well, I don't remember. Yeah, I would do a Damascus demo every time I ran a class,
Yeah.
just for the fun of it, to
Yeah.
get people going. And then very soon after I started making Damascus, I think Bertie Rietveld followed me, and he was the next guy along.
Okay.
That would have been in early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, I was running my forge, I think, by about 1986, 87,
Okay.
making the first Damascus. Yeah.
Yeah, you make some beautiful Damascus. Um, what was it like the first? Because when you were first making Damascus, it wasn't very widespread. There weren't a lot of people. I assume, especially in South Africa, but even just in the United States, there weren't a lot of guys making Damascus. Um, and so, did people feel like? I mean, did it feel like black magic or something that you were making this material? And then transforming it into these beautiful blades? I mean, what was that like for you back then?
You know, I just love the texture and the look of it.
Mm,
I think that's what really attracted me. I mean,
okay.
I love natural materials. In South Africa, we've got all these different hardwoods. You know, every year we would go out into the bush and collect
Sure.
African blackwood and pink ivory and wild olive and a whole range of woods. And we go home and saw up these old dead branches, and out would come these beautiful things. And all those natural things just took me away from the stainless steel into the Damascus. It just looked so nice.
I see. Yeah.
I think that was the main draw at that stage. And we were really not, I can't claim to have been forging to shape at all.
Sure.
We were making Damascus and then grinding our knives out of Damascus bar.
I mean, honestly, that's a very fair I mean, I think people get too prescriptive when they're like, it has to be forged or it has to be this or it has to be that. And I think really what a maker should do is collect skills and knowledge and technique so that they can make a more informed decision. And honestly, a lot of times in a lot of applications, it's not, you don't want to forge it. The amount of distortion that is introduced into the pattern is not desired.
Exactly.
And so I think it's totally fine. People say, if it's not forged, I don't want it. It's like, if it's a big old mess, I don't want it. I'll tell you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what can I say about that? I want it to look beautiful,
Sure.
as well as to be functional.
Yeah.
And properly functional. And so design is super, super important to me. And so if I spend a lot of time designing something on paper, then that's how I want it to be in the finished product.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to take what I've designed and mash it out with a hammer.
Right.
Yeah.
I got you.
And at the same time, I really enjoy some of the distortions that
Sure.
are created by moving steel around.
Yeah. And again, that's being able to have the skill and the knowledge to be able to make essentially an informed aesthetic design, like intentional design decision, to where you want the distortion, where you don't want the distortion, I think is crucial.
Yeah.
I think having the knowledge and the ability to make those choices is more impressive to me than whether you forge the knife to shape or not.
Yeah.
Personally. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So can you talk to me about your design process and how I guess how you approach designing or kind of establishing your style or what you're known for? I think a big thing that I hear over and over again, people are asking how, because I have another podcast that I do called Knife Talk, and the question we often get in is how do I distinguish myself from other people? How do I establish my own style? And I think, and I don't know if you struggle with that or just right off the bat you had your own style, or if you emulated other makers before eventually developing your own style. Like, how did that initially first work for you, and then how do you continue to set your work apart?
Okay. Well, Marika, let's start with, I would not have considered myself an artist 30 years ago, but my wife is an artist, and she said to me, there's a great deal you can learn about proportion and what looks great if you're prepared to go and do a little bit of study. And she said, you need to start looking at things and carefully and asking yourself, why do I like that? Try to describe what is it about this that is exciting me?
Sure.
And so we'll put that on one side. So I started to draw a lot more, and then I came to realize that in wanting to be distinctive, if I was continually looking at knives, then I would never develop a style of my own. I mean, you try and ease in between a whole lot of other knife makers. And I wanted, really, I think the epitome for me of a great design is when somebody can see the knife 2 tables away at a show and say, oh, I know who made that knife. I don't even have to go and look at the name or anything. I know who made the knife. So they should be. Was trying for something as distinctive as that. So most of my artistic development came in the late 1990s onwards, and into my first 10 years, and once we got here to America, and I learned that I needed to go to other sources for inspiration. So I'd go to nature for inspiration. I would go to architecture, jewelry, buildings, all kinds of things for inspiration rather than going to look at other knives. And
Sure.
there's nothing wrong with looking at other knives. You need to be doing that because you're making a knife after all. But
Right.
I can remember coming to a point when we were in Denver where I said to myself, I'm not even going to draw in a room where there are knife books because there's a tendency to go and sneak a peek. I'm going to go
Oh,
to some other place where there's other input. Furniture is a great one as well. Go
sure.
to Art Deco furniture. And I found that the Art Deco world, although I love Art Nouveau and did quite a lot of stuff that was more Art Nouveau inclined with some engravers in South Africa, the Art Deco stuff, it's just so energetic, and I love the energy.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And of course it is because it is geometric. It lends itself to creation using machines. So
Right.
yeah, so I'm able to get all these squares and triangles and sharp points using machines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and it's interesting to hear you say that you wouldn't have considered yourself an artist. I think you said 30 years ago, right? Because I mean, the way you started your story and how you got to where you were making knives, it did sound like you were a maker of things, but you were more of
Yes.
a you're a builder, you're a problem solver, but not necessarily from kind of like that aesthetic approach. It was more about functionality in a way.
Had a look. I mean, a good English shotgun is a beautiful looking thing. Had to look
Sure.
good. The knife had to look good too. I mean, that
Right.
first knife I made never went into my grandfather's shotgun case.
Oh, it didn't.
No, it did not.
Where did it go? Do you still have it?
No, I gave it away as a 21st birthday present, and it was
Oh.
stolen. Yeah,
Oh,
somebody.
no.
Yeah, so they disappeared. Anyhow,
Heartbreaking.
yes.
Heartbreaking. Yeah. But I would definitely consider you an artist now, and I think you have found that balance. And I really like that Art Nouveau or sorry, Art Deco style that you work in. I think you do a great job with that for sure. I'm gonna pull up some. You sent me a bunch of photos. There were
Yes.
just a couple of them that couldn't upload, but I think we still have some of your earlier like fixed
Might have
blade
been a
work.
little, the file's a little big. Oh,
Um,
there we go.
I think it was the file type that we're struggling with. I see.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, and maybe this isn't that old because this has what looks like what do you call that down the middle of the dagger? Do you call
I,
that herringbone?
I do call it herringbone. It's
You
the
do?
ultimate herringbone.
Y
Precise herringbone, yes.
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
precise herringbone with the
This
gold on front of the guard, and is that mammoth tooth?
and that's a mammoth tooth. And that was an interesting would we call it a collaboration? I love
Sure.
making that piece. It was for a favorite client. I
Okay.
was at a guild show when the guild was running out in Vegas, and I think about 96 or 97. And that piece of mammoth tooth was lying on somebody's table, and he was selling it. And I
Okay.
picked it up, and I thought, there is a dagger handle. We don't need to change anything.
Right. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
how at the end you can see that
Yes,
it's
that
unchanged.
snapped off end.
You're right.
And yeah, so I went to my client and I showed him and I said, I think I see a dagger. And he says, yes, I think you see my dagger in
Oh.
in that. And so I went away and that's what we came up with.
That's a good move. When it comes to sales, that's a very strong move. Were
Yeah,
you intending that at all, or is just the
I,
client just
I
said,
was
"You know what?"
hoping for it.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
I was hoping for it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And
Yeah.
then so what I'm seeing are twists on the edge, probably a twist bar that looks like maybe it's been split down the middle and then added to the outside edge
Yeah.
of your precision welded
So,
herringbone right through the
so
middle.
it's kind of twisted W's. Welded,
Okay.
yeah, cut down the set. So it was a big bar that would have been, that blade is thick. It's 3/8 of an inch thick in its core.
Oh, wow. Like right
Yeah,
down the ridge.
right down the ridge. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's a
So
hefty blade.
it's a heavy blade. So yeah, I had a 3/8 probably by a 1-inch wide bar
Okay,
that I split down the middle, transposed it, and
right.
put the herringbone down. And that piece of herringbone, that's the biggest piece of herringbone I've ever made. And that blade is,
I was gonna say
I
that
can't
blade
forget,
looks
it's
like
about a 13-inch blade.
wow,
Yeah.
jeez,
So that stack of herringbone, because that's made up with individual pieces.
right.
Yeah, that stack was huge.
I I can't. So, do you mind going into just to help people appreciate more kind of what's going into that? Like, so you mentioned that it's individual pieces, um,
How do
and
I describe it? At this point, yeah, you know. So when I make that, this one was probably smaller. It was a 2-inch wide billet.
oh,
Okay, that I
okay,
could cut slices off.
hmm
The nickel pieces are bent in a 90-degree die,
sure,
and it's the nickel pieces that hold everything kind of in the loose state, hold it together. The 1095 pieces, you can't bend them, so they get a 45-degree angle bent on every edge. So there are dozens of little pieces of
right,
1095, 2 inches wide,
yeah,
2 inches long, or half an inch wide, with a 45-degree angle ground on it that are stacked together.
wow,
So the one nickel, one nickel V, 2 pieces of 1095,
right.
nickel V, and so stack them all up.
And you fit them; they have to fit perfectly. I mean, how did you I mean, maybe we should step back. I'd be curious to understand how you even developed this approach. Is it inspiration from something you somewhere else, or is just something you worked out in your problem solver brain that you're like, let's try this, and it worked, or
It's funny. My earliest recollection of it was it's very dynamic. The points are super. The V is a very dynamic element, and
yeah,
I had been in early days, way back from South Africa. I'd been putting a piece of tight twist onto the edge of a slanted nickel and 1095 lines.
mm,
And a lot of my knives still, probably from some of the pictures, will show exactly that. And then I felt that that little V from the herringbone creates a very nice directional element in a blade.
absolutely.
So I still have one piece of the very first bar of herringbone that I made.
Oh
And
wow,
yeah, that was forged whilst I was still working for Spyderco in up in Denver in about 2001 or something like that.
okay,
Yeah,
incredible.
and that's where the journey down all these fancy little bars, which with a lot of machine pieces that are then forged together,
Hmm
started.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you use EDM in some of your work, is that correct?
I use it in the handles,
It's more in the handles.
and
Okay.
yeah, in the handles, and most people think of EDM as something. I think mainly they think of a wire EDM, and wire EDM is if you can envisage a computer-controlled bandsaw where the bandsaw blade is a 0.3 millimeter diameter piece of copper wire, and literally it's a bandsaw. The machine I use, so back up. It does not cut blind holes. It cuts right through everything. The machine I use
Oh,
is
interesting.
a die sinking machine, and it makes blind holes.
Oh, wow.
So, and you have to make electrodes that are the shape of the hole. And so when you look at some of those fancy, elaborate Art Deco handles, the triangular pockets with the sharp corners in them are burned into the handle.
Let's see if we can pull one of these up.
There's a good one.
Yeah.
Get a little pointer here. let's take that little gold inlay in the back there. And in fact, both of them are done with an EDM, but there's an electrode that's almost identical shape to that gold inlay that burns
Oh,
in that pocket
wow.
into the steel.
I had no idea that's how that worked.
Yeah, so there
That's
you
amazing.
go. And so that's, it's sharp corners and points
Yeah,
are super energetic in any design.
right.
If you took this inlay and you reduced all these nice tight corners to radii, it wouldn't have nearly the same energy.
Sure.
And all these inlays, it's difficult to see in this picture, but the inlays I like texture in a knife. I don't like everything flush finished. I like a lot of texture. So all the inlays stand proud by about 5 thou.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the email where this one was at because we can we can kind of zoom in a little bit closer at the details if I share the screen, and then we can get a little bit tighter in here. So let's go do screen share to this one. All right. Can you see me zooming in now?
Yes, except the other one's on top.
Oh, the other one's on top.
Yeah. The original one that you put up there is on top.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
The
I see. I did.
standing one is underneath.
I gotta get rid of this one.
There we go.
There we go. And then we'll go back.
Yeah.
My bad. Okay. Okay. So the gold. Let's see if we can. I'm trying to get this to drag down. It doesn't want to play very nicely right now. But you're talking about the kind of diamond shapes towards the butt of the handle
No, I'm talking about
initially.
the two big panels.
Oh, the big panels.
The diamond shapes are all part of Alice Carter's engraving. She added on to that.
Okay.
The lines and the gold in the back. The lock mechanism with its tight corners, that's also burnt into the scale, or the cavity for that lock is burned in with the EDM.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you can see. Okay, so go ahead.
And there we have a 3-piece. In fact, if you blow that up, I think it's more than that. I think that blade is the same blade that I made at Travis's. When we forged this together, there was the I see me pointing things out here. You can't see what I'm pointing at, can you?
No, but I'm pretty good at visualizing what you're talking about.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we have a twisted bar of W's split in half and reversed. Then we have 3 little lines, which would be sort of 5 thou nickel separated by 20 thou 1095.
Oh,
then
wow.
we have the bar in the middle, which came off a loaf.
Yep.
Which was made as a loaf with all the little square nickel diamonds. And then we have the herringbone. And you see how energetic that blade is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like how because typically people would put, you said that the twist was split and then turned inside out.
Yes.
And what that means is what's normally along the edge, especially even the edge of the twist bar, once you split it, you're turning it inside. Is that correct?
Yes. So what was the edge of the bar is now welded to the so the center of the bar becomes the cutting edge. Maybe that's the better way to describe it.
Yeah. And so, yes. Yeah, I think that does. And what I like about that, especially, is that it helps, even though like the stars that you see in twist patterns or even simpler twist patterns are okay, but to me, they're not the most interesting part of the twist effect. And you're kind of eliminating maybe what I would consider the less interesting portion of the twist, and you're highlighting the more interesting portions, and you're incorporating it in an unusual way, familiar but unusual.
It's interesting that you always call that twist. I don't know what the actual history of. I don't know for sure what the actual history, the true history of explosion pattern is. I've heard various stories.
Sure.
But I think the first ones that I ever saw were Kai Embritson.
Kai Embritson. Okay.
Yeah, he's out of Sweden.
Okay.
One of the Swedish guys.
Yeah.
I mean, who first decided to forge a billet on its edge and created W's by mistake. I'm sure it was by mistake. Seems
Oh,
natural to
sure.
me. They forgot what they were doing, which
Yeah.
was the right side to forge on, and they
Right.
forged on the edge, and they twisted, and out came these very interesting, sharp, pointy patterns. And all Kai's braids were split down. He'd take a bar, split it down the middle, and then transpose the two pieces so
Okay.
that the edges became the center line,
Right.
and then forge them back together again.
Yeah.
And so I would call that explosion pattern, and you would call that a twisted pattern. Well, it is a twisted pattern, but it's a way of getting the W's out to be viewed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was it for a long time. That was the only way that you could kind of expose the mosaic
Yes,
effect or
yes,
pattern that you've created.
yes.
Because before that, yeah,
And
there
of
was
course, today I could just, if I wanted to do explosion pattern in the other way, I could just make a lot of tiles and forge them together.
right. Yeah.
And
Early on, it was either laddering, accordion,
yes,
and twisting, and that was basically it
but
for a while.
it's absolutely amazing. Should I go into that a little bit? I mean, if you put maybe guys would be interested to know that little blade is forged together with a sort of a 2-pound hammer, and there's the minimal amount of forging.
Yeah.
The actual composite.
Right.
Of course, we're not talking about the other parts, but the actual composite part. When I put together those 5, was it 1, 2,
Oh,
5, 6 pieces in that blade? When I
Sure.
put together the 6 pieces in this blade, that's done with a little 2-pound hammer.
That's incredible.
That's all. I mean, you were probably busy and weren't watching down the hammering, but that's all I used to forge those together.
Mhm.
And I think and then people will start asking you, don't you have to get a lot of reduction to get everything to forge together? Well, if you
Right.
have really coarse finishes, yes, to get 100% metal to metal contact, you have to reduce quite a bit. But if you put superfine
Right.
finishes on everything, you can forge with a minimal force.
Right. And what would you consider a superfine finish?
I go up to around 1200 grit on all
Right.
those surfaces that weld together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard that is kind of that's the right place to be. I go to a much coarser grit. I'm only doing up to about 220.
Uh-huh.
But that's because when I'm consolidating the material or my tiles, they're going to go through a lot of they usually go through at least 25% reduction before I start working against those welds and actually drawing those tiles back out.
Right.
And I make sure they're so they're clean at 220. They're very flat off a flat disc. I don't have a surface grinder, so I don't use a surface grinder, unfortunately. Though I'm sure that really helps to get things really well dialed in. And then I just start forging out a blade. And I've definitely lost blades experimenting with how coarse of a finish I could get away with, or how little reduction can I get away with before starting to work against those forge welds. And so a 220 finish with 25% reduction has been kind of the sweet spot for me lately. But
Well,
that
right.
that is really impressive on these multi-bar. And I understand why you don't want to go heavy.
No,
You're not trying to introduce any other distortion or anything. You
no,
want to keep everything
no.
really
I've
nice.
done everything. I just want to get it 100% welded.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, I can remember opening I do this all in a little box.
Right.
It's all kind of boxed up, and I can remember bringing a box up to welding temperature, and for some reason I decided there was something wrong inside, and I didn't want to actually hammer on it at all. I just opened the box up when it was cold, and
Right.
some of those, just from touching one another, some of those parts had already welded together without even hitting it with a hammer.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, and I've heard that about things wanting to, if the surfaces are clean enough to want to cold weld, to start to be able to establish that connection with each other. I just pulled in a bunch of pictures. I'm going to try to pull into our conversation here. Of course, now I gotta find them. They're of some of the pictures you actually have on your Instagram, that
Mhm.
you've shared of your process. And
Oh,
is that all right? Are you
yes,
interested in sharing those? Okay,
yes.
just to help for
I know
people
there's,
watching the video to help kind of illustrate some of what you're just
oh, I know
talking about
there's some
here.
herringbone stuff on the Instagram.
Yeah. So this is all your myriad of parts.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there you
And
can see
then
there's a block of mild steel at the bottom with a V machined into it. That's the
right.
base of the stack. Then
Okay.
there's a block of 1095 or W2 standing there with a point on it right
Yeah,
at the top there.
just to
That's
the
the
right of
top of
it.
the
Yeah.
block, and that's what goes into the action of the knife.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have your nickels stacked to the left. It's been folded, but then you have
Yes.
all your pieces of 1095 with
Yep.
chamfers.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
And
It's
then, I
amazing.
mean, there's more to the process than that. They all get clamped together, and the whole thing gets surface ground on the outside, and then it gets. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go. There's this strap clamp holding it all together. Surface
Right.
ground on the sides. Then that gets encased in a 1/2 inch of mild steel.
Interesting.
1/2 inch
I
plates on either side. Yeah,
I know why you want to do that, but why do you want to share why you do that?
sure. Well, first of all, it's to box it.
Sure.
Primary thing, keep the air out, box it up. But the
Yep.
second thing is when we forge it out and forge it out, and I do quite a lot of reduction on that.
Yep.
It masks all the, in some cases, hammer blows or press marks.
Right.
So that'll be absorbed by the mild steel and won't be transferred into the core.
So helping to reduce the unwanted distortion
Yeah, yeah,
in reducing the billet down, which
yeah.
is really cool, super impressive. And so this is a
There we are.
look, yeah, inside the can.
There's a little one opened up, and I
Yeah.
love the way it comes out so silver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's that nickel, right?
Yeah. I was actually thinking of the end of the can because
Oh,
these
the end.
cans have all sealed up and they had kerosene in them.
Sure.
All the iron oxide is reduced,
Right.
and it leaves you this bright finish.
Right. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's very clean.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
yes, that's
cool.
the nickel that you're seeing there in the herringbone.
And if people aren't watching the video, say you're listening to just the podcast version, you can go to Owen Wood Design on Instagram. Give him a follow as well as look through his posts because he's got a lot of really beautiful work that is absolutely impressive. It's, I mean, and you show some of your work in progress, which is
Yeah.
cool. But the intensity to me, it's like there are so many parts.
Oh, that
It
one
feels
picture
very
there
intense.
with all those parts. You want to put that one up?
Like this one. Oh,
Yes. Oh, that one. Yes. That one would be good.
yeah.
I forget how many pearl inlays there are in there, but that's a lot.
Yeah. There's also, yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, I can grab a couple. Oh, geez. I see what one you're talking about. Okay. I'm gonna grab a couple more of these off. When you I guess what gave you the confidence to try that canning that with the herringbone the first time?
Oh,
Was it just like where did that come from? Is it just a thought you had, or is it discussions with other makers? Like how did that come about?
I'm trying to think back. I know the idea. Okay. I think somewhere in the early 90s, I met a gentleman by the name of Hank Nickmeyer.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes. In Paris. The show
Oh
in
wow, cool.
Paris. Yeah. And we were chatting away, and he was talking to me about using kerosene.
Okay.
To exclude to clean all the oxygen, etc., out of out of the atmosphere around a billet and putting it in a box.
Sure.
And I think that's where you know where? Of course, it started with powder and making mosaic in cans.
Okay.
That's where the idea came. And then I thought, well, because I was battling to get these little things forged together. You'll remember at the Hammer-In, our friend made that lovely big Damascus dagger with all the parts were wired together with wire.
Oh yeah, Vince.
And
yeah.
they were all flopping around.
Right.
In midair, and the whole thing came together beautifully. Well, some of the little blades I started doing like that. You get distortion of the shape, not necessarily because I didn't hit them very hard, but distortion of the shape of the parts because I didn't have anything to support that shape and prevent it from distorting as I hammered on it.
I see. Okay.
So then I transferred to putting them in a box and putting kerosene in a box. And once we started doing that, it just worked so beautifully that I can't remember in 15 years ever doing anything else. Every blade I make is built up into a box like that.
Right.
Yeah.
For some reason, the idea of putting kerosene in a sealed container sounds dangerous to me. Or is there a
there's a little hole. There's a little hole
for like bleed out.
Yeah, I've blown a couple. I wouldn't say blown up. No explosions or anything, but I've bulged. There's a little bleed hole, and when I'm working here, I've actually got a threaded hole, and I put a screw in it. And if I tighten that screw, it can seal that hole. And I've had a box bulge, but then it starts to blow kerosene out down the screw. So I've never had an explosion. And the other thing, I mean, I still use kerosene. Sure. Although super glue has sort of superseded that, because as we're working with all these little parts,
right,
in order to hold them together so that you can work with them easily, I just glue them all together with super glue.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's effectively doing the same thing.
It's doing the same thing.
It's giving the oxygen or it's combusting within and basically taking away any of the oxygen or available oxygen that might be inside of the container.
If folk go, and I love doing this because it is, I'm pretty certain, thanks to Hank Nickmeyer, he told me to go and look for a diagram called the Ellingham, Ellingham, Ellingham's free energy diagram. And this diagram is a chemical diagram. It describes the affinity for oxygen of various compounds and elements.
Okay.
And at various temperatures. So at our welding temperature of, say, 2,100, 2,000 degrees, where am I going with this? Your kerosene will dissociate and give you some free hydrogen in the box, and that's going to grab up all the oxygen. Okay. And of course, it will reduce iron oxide. So if you have any actual iron oxide in the sides of the box or anything, or in your joints, it will actually reduce that and grab the oxygen away. Now, the interesting thing is, if you take that a little bit further, if you have chrome in the box, chrome at 2,000 degrees has a greater affinity for oxygen than hydrogen or carbon. So it will actually reduce water and grab the oxygen away from the water, and it'll grab it away from carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide.
Oh wow!
And then finally, this is getting a little technical. Finally, titanium has a higher affinity than chrome. So putting paper in a box or a hydrocarbon into a box to try and get stainless steel to weld together won't work, because it won't absorb the oxygen. The chrome in the stainless steel will get the oxygen, not the carbon in the paper.
Right. Interesting.
Okay. Or the kerosene or whatever it is. Just little aside. I like that diagram. It's fun.
I just Googled it because that's too cool. I got to look at it later.
Yeah. Okay.
just to get back to when I was mentioning some of your pieces on your Instagram and the intensity of them.
Oh, there we go.
This is can you tell me about the picture we're looking at right now?
Sure. Okay, so that's a piece of 416 stainless. Every one of those holes was burned with on the EDM with an electrode, and in
Wow.
this case, I've burned right through,
Sure.
which I can do. Okay, and then I sit and on a tool and cutter grinder, and I very carefully cut out all those tiny pearl pieces. And I'm not going to count them, but there are a lot in there.
There's a lot of them.
There are a lot in there, and they've all got to fit perfectly.
Right.
And sometimes you'll get a bad fit, and I have to punch it out and do another
Yeah.
one. But yeah, that one was a labor of love.
There's 36 pieces on either side, so that you have essentially chevrons or the
Yes,
herringbone going right down through the middle. But down through the very middle, there are smaller squares and then rectangles with kind of a 45-degree
with the
going off
45.
to the
Yeah,
side. Yeah.
yep,
And so
yeah,
and then there's two of them. So there's 72 pieces altogether.
yeah.
Yeah,
That was
that's a lot.
an AKI knife. Yep,
Yeah.
I think one of those was enough.
Sure. Wow.
Uh,
That's incredible. And that's cool. Like when I see this and you're talking about doing this kind of piercing, my brain goes to, well, can we instead of the mother of pearl and these and this tortoiseshell and all this, what if we put Damascus elements in there? Or and it
Absolutely.
was 1095 sheet or 1080 sheet or something, right? Like what would that look like? And then setting the welds on that. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like this is a very interesting organization of materials. And I wanted to show you a piece that was roughly based off of your work, but definitely inspired by your work. This is a pattern I made a while back called
Oh, there we go. I've seen this one. I love it.
yeah, I called this the braid mosaic, and I was discussing in my last Q&A that I did just before we jumped into here with our chat how everything welded up perfectly. I put a sheet of 15 and 20 on the front to reduce the kind of the carbon exchange that would typically occur with mild steel.
Hmm.
So I put a sheet of 15 and 20 on either side, on the front and the back, to partially can it, and then I just welded up the rest of the joints. But the 15 and 20 acted as a kind of scaffolding for the parts. So my first hit was actually against the faces to weld that canning to the individual
Oh,
pieces to
okay,
support them
okay.
as I was jamming them all together. And so the top and bottom were flat. And I wish I had a picture in here of the original stack because off the side, all of the points, the corners of the bars were still poking out. And so there was going to be a lot of stress going into the billet as I shoved those points in.
Points
And
in, yes.
I gently did it under a 110 Samac. I love the 100-pound hammers, but anyway, it's a 110 Samac, and just worked hot and gently massaged it in and just kept every round. I would always make sure to hit it from the top and bottom again, which were flat in the faces, just to help encourage the alignment and everything there. And it stuck. And then I totally messed it up by doing half the finish grinding before I realized I hadn't heat treated the knife yet. So
Oh,
unfortunately, this piece did
oh.
not end up transforming into anything finished. But I do look forward to doing it again in the future. And I have a different approach that I think I'll use. It'll be similar but different. But I thought you would appreciate that.
I think that's beautiful. And I mean, it really is herringbone, and a herringbone of its own quality,
Right.
of a
Thank you.
special quality. Yeah. Do you still have that piece?
So I forged it into a chef's knife, and
Okay.
then like I said, I did a bunch of heat or finish grinding on it
Okay.
before I realized it wasn't heat treated. I tried heat treating it, and it turned into a wiggly piece of
Oh,
bacon.
yep.
I
Yep.
straightened it as best as I could, but it wasn't viable as a chef's knife anymore. So it's in the shop. It's a hunting knife now, a little hunter, like an integral hunter that I have yet to finish. But I look at it every once in a while. A little bit sad that I had done something very cool and then totally just ruined it, basically.
Oh, but it is super cool. It's lovely.
Thank you. But
Yeah.
I wanted to share that with you because your work definitely had inspired kind of my approach to developing and making that pattern. Um, when you talk about using the kerosene, how do you mind if I ask you how, like, do you saturate the billet or are you just putting a few drops in?
You know, Mareka, not well enough prepared for this, and I apologize.
No, you're fine.
I should have brought some examples here, and I'm sitting in the house and I can't get to them. The workshop's 100 yards away.
No, you're totally fine.
So when I forged together one of those little blades,
Mhm.
in I have what I call a sacrificial anvil. So
Mm,
if you take a blade shape, I've got to have something underneath that blade shape to support it when I start
right,
hammering on the edges. So that's a piece of
right.
mild steel that is grounded exactly the same thickness as all my parts.
Okay.
And then the whole blade is surrounded with mild steel of that sort of the same thickness, and
Right,
then two side plates,
right.
and then we arc weld all the way around the outside.
Yep.
And it's at that instant, after it's arc welded, I don't want the thing to be hot. I just go and dunk it in a big can of kerosene. And there's a little hole in the side, so it sucks kerosene in through the hole, so the whole thing gets filled up.
Okay.
But often enough, those parts are, we say the whole thing gets filled up, but those parts are pretty tightly fitted, and
Sure.
there's not much space in there. So,
Right.
you'll suck a little bit of kerosene in there, and then you see when you throw it in the forge, you'll see it start off gassing through the port. You'll
Right.
get a little bit of flame coming out. Yeah,
Interesting. I see. So the materials are already if whether it's, or yeah, I guess it would be multiple pieces, but they're already in a blade shape, and so you take up the negative space from what would make a kind of a regular rectangular shape,
beautifully described. Beautifully
and
described,
then
exactly. So I form a rectangle with
yeah,
the negative spaces get filled up with mild steel.
that makes sense. And then that way you can do your tap forging with your small. You can just
Yeah,
tap it together where you're
yeah,
not introducing any unnecessary distortion. You're encouraging those pieces to come together, and you're getting even
yeah.
that's a really great
Sometimes we
really
have
great
to
idea.
forge on end as well.
Sure.
There's one of those knives I sent you called a Dun Star.
Um.
It's you could pull it up. It's got a crank in the blade,
Okay. I'll pull it up, but go ahead and keep talking, and I'll keep.
and so that one's not only got to be forged from top and bottom, it's also got to be forged from the ends.
Oh wow. Okay. Here we go. The Dunstar. I'll do the screen share again
Okay.
so that we can get a closer look at this particular piece. Okay.
There we go.
And let's zoom in. Let's see. Oh, oh, I see what I'm doing. I'm zooming the wrong way. I'm supposed to use these little buttons on the thing. Okay.
There
We
we
can
go.
move it around. Yeah.
Okay. So when you go down into the blade, you can see it's cranked at the end there, and so in that box, when I forged that together, sort of an inch from the tip, you can see that crank. That's actually a weld, both in
Oh.
the twisted explosion on the edge and in the triangle and dot billet.
Oh yeah. Look at
That's a
that.
weld down there. So it had to be forged from top and bottom and from the front as well. And
Wow.
those, there were a number of failures before I worked out where to place all my hammer blows, which was the right place to put the first hammer blow.
Sure.
Yeah.
I believe it. Well, and I love, like, I feel like nowadays a lot of people the texture that the lines are making along the spine, somebody would just mill those in, but these are
Yeah.
pattern welded in.
Those are pattern weld. That's nickel
Yeah.
coming out the top. Yes.
That is so cool.
And it looks so nice. Yeah. And then all the rest
That's
in
beautiful.
the handle is more EDM work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The circles and the triangles.
The circles and the triangles, the wave shapes in that gold inlay.
Yeah.
That's EDM.
Oh wow, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. The work in the pivot is EDM on the lock bar.
Right.
Yeah.
And so something you mentioned earlier is and when it comes to approaching a design, that in South Africa you guys were a little you weren't as overly concerned with the various approaches to making knives, whether, if somebody was forging to shape, or if they were sending out for heat treatment, or I guess incorporating technology into their making process. I feel like there are some people here in the United States, and probably other places in the world, where they're like, if you don't do every single step yourself with your own two hands, then it's not handmade, it's not custom made. Um, but you incorporate a lot of technology, and I would be curious to see, or to hear your take on how you view the use of technology, like the EDM, or I've seen people are Niels Vandenberg is using I think laser engraving and lasering to help kind of lay out and mark for depth. He's still getting in with an engraver, but for like some of his inlay work that he does on some of his blades, and it's just I think it's great. I think that it's very cool and it's a unique approach. It can be good either way, but I'm curious on your take about the incorporation of technology in the
Okay. Well,
process. Yeah,
where should I start? I mean, I it looks as if I'm using a lot of technology. There's no computer-controlled machine in my shop.
sure.
That EDM is not a computer-controlled machine. Every one of those cavities burned with an electrode
Right.
that is made on a pantograph, and
Oh, wow.
that's my poor man's CNC.
Yeah.
Is the pantograph. So I work with two ordinary 3-axis hand-operated
Right.
milling machines, no CNC. And the EDM, the only thing that gets controlled by the machine is the
Okay.
depth that you
Sure.
burn into. That is all. I love working with other engravers. I love working
Sure.
with other people. I like collaborations.
Yeah.
I think they're fun. You put two heads together and you can sometimes come out with something which is really exciting. At the same time, you're working with somebody else. And I tend to work so much alone that working with somebody else it's a gift.
Sure.
It's a great gift
Absolutely.
to me to have somebody, want to work with me, to have an engraver work with me. And that's fun too, as long as it's a true collaboration. I'm not fond of, sorry, I'm going down another rabbit trail.
You're doing great.
I see a lot of engraving that is just, scroll work for the sake of scroll work. We've got to cover this. We got to cover this panel because it's a bright silver panel. We got to cover it with something, and it's not integrated into the knife. To my mind, when we don't always achieve perfection. But if I look at a knife, I want to see the whole knife first. I say, what a knife! What a beautiful knife! And then, but did you see the steel in the blade? Oh, but did you see the work that he did back here? And did you see this little thing? But the first thing that strikes somebody is the whole complete object.
As an overall composition.
As an overall composition. Great. Nice way of putting it. And that's where an engraver who really works well and looks at the subject material and integrates his work into the completed object, just fantastic. And there, I'd like to give a shout out to my old Russian friend, Amayak Stepanyan. I mean, he does a masterful job at that, of integrating that work. So now we come to other technology. Well, the finished object is probably the most important thing. If that object is, if you need to use CAD to design your knife, if you want to make parts on a CNC and that CNC is on your floor and you know how to control it and how to work with it, sure. Where I kind of object is where guys have parts made out everywhere and he's essentially a finishing assembly shop. That's where I kind of draw the limit on a handmade knife. That's no longer handmade.
I got you. Yeah, no, I agree. That makes sense for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I've never really taken that into consideration while in regards to initially looking at the piece as an overall composition. I think for my work for culinary knives, I do a lot of work to develop very interesting and ornate patterns that are controlled, but also have an organic flow to them, like the one I just showed you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I'm somewhat limited on the because I work mostly with natural handle materials, um, in complementing the activity in the blade and transposing that across into the handle. Um, and so it makes I guess it helps me realize that I mean, I already knew that folders were a much more complicated thing to make, but just the amount the 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 amount of extra consideration that goes into not just the blade, but then what else are we also doing in the handle? Because we are in you're in control of the design of the overall thing, the overall composition, like you're saying,
Mm.
from tip to tail. Um, yeah, there's just so much more to take into consideration that I hadn't thought about or taken into consideration myself before, and
Well,
it helps me to appreciate what I'm looking at even more. I mean, before I was just like, yeah, that looks pretty, but now to see it and just really to see it from that point of consideration that you as the original maker and designer, or if you're doing collaborative work, you know, how you and your collaborator work as a team to come up with this cohesive overall composition that is then broken down into a myriad small pieces that have to be just perfectly come together, to ultimately still create a properly functioning tool, but with many aesthetic qualities to it.
yeah, and you know that's the. I mean, if I just sort of track my history, we made simple knives in the beginning. It was
Sure.
a blade, a tang, a guard, a handle.
Yeah.
That was it. And then you made a lot of those, and most of my customers are collectors. They've got those, and that's a simple thing. Some of them still like to collect that sort of thing, but
Right.
it's just for me, it was just a natural progression to get more and more complex. And I like mechanisms, so I like getting into making tiny parts that fit together.
Sure.
And then, yeah, I think because I do like to be in control of everything, despite the fact that I like working with other people too.
Sure.
I like to plan out that whole design.
Yeah. Would you say that you have OCD or control issues, or it's just really important to you for it to have to be cohesive?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just I like flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know everything. I don't have a better way of describing it. My grasp on the English language is not as good as my grasp on making knives.
Sure. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
I want to take a second to just poke through some of these photos that you did send me, and have you maybe just take a second to discuss. We kind of talked on this one
We
regarding the
did.
blade. And I'm starting to see now after talking with you, like I can see you use the EDM to sync the panels on this one
Right.
especially. Yeah.
And then the EDM to decorate the panels.
Right.
So I made, and the thing about that electrode, it is a mirror image of what you see,
Oh, right.
particularly in the decoration. So yeah,
Wow.
so you got to think like a dentist.
Interesting. So you design the positive, you make a negative, and then you
Yep.
use the negative to
Yeah.
sync the
And
positive.
that's all pen and paper for me,
Right.
or pencil and paper for
Yeah.
designing those. Yeah. And I
Is
use
that
a
Oh, sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
go.
No,
I use
go
a
ahead.
lot of trig. I hated maths at school, but I love trig now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The panels, they're gold. Are they solid gold?
Ah,
Or is it go ahead. Go ahead.
no. So the panels go in about 40, 50 thou,
Okay.
and I don't need to expose 50 thou of gold.
Sure.
Sorry, so I don't need to use 50 thou of gold and just put it in a hole where nobody can see it. So
Right.
I take 20 thou gold or
Okay.
25 thou gold, and I silver solder it to nickel sheet. and
Oh
that
wow.
enables me to hold it and machine it more easily.
Yeah, that's
And
smart.
so that's what goes into the hole.
Sure. And when you're using the when you're using the electrode to sync the design,
Yes.
um, how does it
Oh,
feel burning away
burn
the
the
gold?
gold.
Yeah.
Well, in general, if I am making a show knife, I'm going to use 10 karat gold. I use it for color and for contrast, not
Sure.
for the intrinsic value of the gold. So what's the
Okay.
point of 18 or 20 karat gold? The engravers like the higher carats because it's softer
Right.
and works more easily. If a client asks me to put 18 in, I'll put 18. I'll put anything they want in there.
That's
But
so
for me,
interesting.
it's a color contrast.
I've never taken that into consideration. I've had people ask me to try to figure out how to incorporate gold into Damascus. And I'm always thinking about pure gold, 24 karat gold. And I've never stopped to think about using
The
a
other
lower,
gold.
yeah, using like 10 or whatever, a lower,
Um,
a lower, or I guess, yeah, a
so
lower carat. Yeah.
what's that got in it? It's got copper in it.
Yeah.
I know, and I forget what else. Probably a little zinc.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Don't know what
That's definitely
happens
stuff to take into consideration.
when you. Are you talking about forging it in?
Somehow incorporating it. But yeah, possibly forging it, possibly just laminating it. If I were to laminate it, I would probably have to use some sort of nickel sheet to help get it to adhere properly to any kind of steel or Damascus core or cladding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's still something I haven't really approached yet, um, for fear of the massive cost.
Oh man, when when you're working with a large chunk of gold, I was making one a little while ago, which had around about $8,000 of gold in it,
Yo,
solid gold handle,
wow.
and you make a mistake, and that lump of gold goes back to be melted down, and
Oh boy.
yeah. And that was 18 karat too.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an expensive piece.
Yeah. Wow.
Scary.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to another piece we got here. Ooh, that's a nice dagger.
Oh, now that is some of my original herringbone too. I know because you can see that I forged it in such a way as that the V is now tighter than 90 degrees.
Yeah, I can see
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
and looking at it in that picture, I think I must do that again. It's really
Yeah.
nice. And
Nice how it.
then,
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead. No, I was just gonna say, yeah, it is nice how it gets tighter and more acute as it makes
yes.
its way towards the tip.
And then you can see some of Stepanyan's engraving
Right.
and how it works with the whole knife.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
And
and
he
especially where the blade, the
yes,
line, it moves into the bolster of the folder. That first little element that he engraves, it
yes,
balances beautifully.
yes. And
Yeah.
that is sort of probably 30 thou deep, and he does it with a chisel and hammer.
Oh, wow.
No, he does not use a pneumatic tool at all. Chisel and hammer.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's cool. I love that knife.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, well, and I can't tell if it's an illusion of the because I feel like I get like almost a kind of vertigo when I'm looking at or the herringbone too closely, but it also looks where at the near the ricasso of the blade, it looks like the herringbone is maybe just slightly narrower than
Then at the
out towards the tip or just in front of the
I think I think it might be because the outer panels that the twisted W's narrow
Mm,
towards the tip, that it's creating an optical illusion.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Man, that looks good. All right.
But there
Oh,
you
go
can
ahead.
see another little thing that that I like to do. All my scales are always reduced in size so that the liners stand proud,
Oh, okay, yeah. I
and
was noticing that.
to create additional textures. And those I used a thick liner, and then I put a little 45-degree chamfer all the way around the edge. You can see that in the top picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, just just another little aspect.
Yeah. It's those small details.
Yes.
I think it's those small details that really help, not only to distinguish your work from others, but um, I think it shows a level of care and by the maker, um, for any collector who might be interested in buying some work, to see all those little details. And I think I feel, at least when it comes to fixed blades, I feel like I see a lot of people rushing through and getting work finished, but it's missing so much opportunity for small details and character that just aren't there because they rush through the process. And
Hmm.
so when that happens, it has a tendency to look like a lot of other stuff, really, more than anything, because those small details that help to really distinguish one particular maker from others.
From the other. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, Mareko, I've probably got another 10 minutes or so.
Okay,
Does
sounds
that?
good.
I see a guy up there, Mike Poor.
Oh yeah,
Is that Jim Poor's son?
I don't know.
You don't
Mike,
know? Yeah. What does
Mike, are
it
you
say?
Jim Poor's son? No, I think Mike Poor is a Washington maker.
Okay.
He's up here,
Okay.
and I have came across an author recently though that I can't remember the title of the book, but the author's name is Mike Poor or
Okay.
Michael Poor, and I'm
All
like,
right.
is that the same Michael Poor? Is that common of a name? It can't be. Can't be. Maybe it's him. Okay.
Okay.
Um. Okay. Let's go. I'll try to go through these other ones a little bit faster then. There's just so many great details. We looked at this one earlier,
We did.
and
Yeah.
again, the EDM syncing, looks like there's Mokome incorporated as well.
There is some titanium,
Oh,
damascus
Titan.
in there. A little bit of
Oh, that
damascus in
I
there.
got
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
And then all the other, the straight lines
Mhm.
in there, that's also EDM. So I make little electrodes that burn those in.
I see.
And then
Wow.
the triangles in the spine, those are also
Right.
burned in with a tiny electrode.
What does I guess I have there's a lot I don't know about EDM. What is the life of the little electrodes? How long do those
Ooh.
last? When you make
They,
one.
they don't. They don't. They burn away at almost the same rate, a
Oh,
little less than the
wow.
steel. So you have to keep trimming
Really?
them. Yeah,
Interesting.
and
Right, to
then
keep it sharp.
yeah, so you have to keep taking them out and trimming them, and then getting them back in exactly the same place. Yeah, and
That sounds like a nightmare. Holy
it's fun.
smokes.
We have some really nice Swedish equipment that realigns those electrodes
Oh,
perfectly.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Nice. That's good. That
and,
does sound helpful. Mike was just saying really quick that he is not related to Jim
I
Poor,
see that. Yeah, I
but
see
they are
that
good
over there.
friends.
Well,
That's
it's
cool.
nice to meet you here. At anyway, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we got another, I think, dagger. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
And this one
Oh,
incorporates some Damascus in the main panel. Looks some
yes,
cool geometric shaping.
that's my Damascus too.
Oh,
And
nice.
this is interesting because you will see. Okay, let's the blade is the blade. I think I can't see. Oh, by the way, this particular knife won best folder at Blade Show last year.
Oh, last year.
Yes,
Congratulations. It's a great piece.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
There's a lot of detail. There's in that. Uh, you see the copper frame around the Damascus.
Yes.
That was an electrode. So I used the copper. I made a copper electrode. I burnt a hole into the steel. Then
Okay.
I made a graphite electrode, and I burnt a hole into the copper. I cut a slice off the electrode.
Oh, wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so I burn it in. The electrode is probably an inch thick in that shape. I burned it in, cut a slice off it, shape this, reduce the thickness of the slice to exactly what it should be, and then use a graphite electrode to burn the cavity for the Damascus.
Wow.
And
I'm just gonna try to zoom in here a bit
yeah,
so we can see that just a little bit better.
and then use other electrodes to burn the cavity for the gold inlays, and then into the gold inlays goes a pearl inlay, and so on.
Wow. Wow. That is cool.
That's fun.
Yeah, I'm seeing, actually, I just realized it also looks like the pivot or at the top of the bit is another type of Damascus.
Okay, so there I have incorporated a little bit of it's a stainless Damascus that I had a piece lying around. I'm trying to remember. It came from Nevada Forge, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vegas, maybe
A
Vegas
Vegas
Forge.
Forge. Yeah, Vegas Forge.
Great. Cool. All right. Let's get back over here and we will stop the share. And then we'll go. Let's see. I think we might have already looked at this dagger.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I sent you another big dagger. Oh, there's an interesting one with a lot of little pearl inlays again.
Yeah. This one's called Solvang. What does that mean?
Oh, Solvang that knife was made for Solvang.
Oh, it's a show. Okay.
Show. Yeah.
I'm just realizing when I'm looking at the blade and I see the herringbone taper, that is part of that's the shape of the bar as you do the precision welding. So that it's not. It's forged to.
No. I've cut a slice off and then I have machined out that taper.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. This is the one I think we used for the calendar.
That's the one you use for the calendar. I love her.
I love this piece.
Really nice.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And we
we'll
talked about this one earlier. Oh, then another. This reminds me. This almost looks like a Star Trek. Looks like this has like a spaceship like quality to it almost to me.
Oh man, this one's. The knife is relatively simple to make. I've made enough of them, but putting that's buffalo horn in the handle.
Okay.
And putting the gold, all this is Cape buffalo horn. Putting this rectangular and square pieces of gold, every hole, every little square hole. I go in with a milling cutter and I mill it out first,
right.
And then there's a square punch that I have to set up in exactly the right attitude and place to punch the square or rectangular hole. Then I machine all those little bits of gold and stick them in the holes.
Holy smokes!
Yes,
right, because this doesn't work with your normal technique where you would use the.
You can't EDM that one in.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, that might be the extent of the ones that we're able to upload.
Okay. Well, that's it then.
Yeah, we'll call it good there. Let me get this off the thing. Looks like maybe. Okay. I really appreciate your time. It's been awesome talking with you and getting to know you better and your story and hear where you came from and how you got into knife making. Oh, I do have, if you got just a couple more minutes.
Sure.
I'm curious about things you are seeing right now that excite you about the knife making industry, whether it's materials or patterns or techniques that people are using, and then maybe some future projects that you might be willing to share that you have coming up. And if you keep your project secret, I don't know your process. I don't know if you keep it kind of secretive until it's unveiled, but maybe something coming up that you're excited about that you're building.
Okay, I love going to Travis's Hammering, and you always something new to learn there. And unfortunately, as we were talking about the other day, as instructors get so busy dealing with people and questions, etc. I would have liked to have got into your mathematics and the way you approach making a billet.
Yeah,
I do want to do some more of that. Of the mosaic type of work. In that last knife with the copper frame around the inlay, that was the first real piece of the mosaic that I'd ever made, and I had to copy some that I had used that a friend of mine in Africa had made, and I had to get as close as I could for the customer. That's what he wanted.
Okay.
And so it was a lot of fun designing that, and I want to move down into that more, into some mosaics, and see how I can incorporate them into the blade and still use the same into the blade as well, and still use the same techniques that I'm using.
Right.
I don't like pattern just running out on the edge of the blade. Everything
Sure.
has got to come together design wise.
I like it. No, I'm into it. Yeah.
And as far as new projects, I have definitely got a couple of big daggers. I like daggers because they're very free. They allow me to do all kinds of things that I can't do in a folding knife, which constricts me. So I'm going to get into a couple of daggers, and I'm definitely, particularly after this has inspired me, Mareko. Thank you so much for doing this. I cannot tell you how much I have enjoyed it and how much I appreciate it. I hope we can do it again sometime.
I would love to.
And we could bring some examples in front of the camera as well.
Sure.
Some stuff that so people could actually see what was going on a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so where can people find you and your work if they're interested in just seeing more or learning? We talked about your Instagram.
Yeah, go to my Instagram page.
Okay.
And Owen Wood Design.
Okay. And no website or Facebook?
No, I don't have a website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And otherwise, people
can always chase you for a telephone number.
Yeah.
If they want to phone me directly.
And if people want to meet you in person, obviously there's the shows. You'll be at Blade Show Atlanta.
I'll be at Blade Show in Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay. And any others lined up?
Not this year. We've got a couple of overseas trips going this year. So going to Africa and to England. So we're going to be busy.
Excellent.
AKI next year. Yeah. And Blade Show. Yep.
Cool. So they can meet you in person at the shows. They can come to Travis's Hammer-In maybe next year and see you there.
Come to Travis's Hammer-In. That's a great place to
learn these techniques in person firsthand. Excellent. Thank you so much, Owen. I really appreciate your time and again your wealth of knowledge and I love hearing your story, man. It's really great.
Well, how do I get to hear yours? That's the next thing.
Yeah. If you listen to podcasts, I actually did a self-interview. I can send you a link if you like listening to things like that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Will you send me a link?
Absolutely.
Thanks, mate.
I will. And I just want to thank our super sponsors one more time. That's Russell Tinsley of Can't Make Knives and Ouzel Finch Beers, Dan Hubbs at 66 Mountain Knives, Lawrence Lake of Maritime Knife Supply, Gabe Fletcher at Anchorage Brewing / Anchorage Forge, Eric Kidwell at District 202 LLC, and Josh A. Weston. Josh Weston, he's on Instagram at Josh A. Weston, as well as the Dragon Forge Experience, Dragon Forge EXP. That's it for everything today. Everybody, go follow Owen. He's worth it. His work is inspirational. You can also find other past work of his. I think if you kind of do some Google searches, image searches online from secondary market and stuff like that. But yeah, his work is phenomenal. And thank you for sharing what you have here today, as well as in general in the world, by just doing great work and inspiring others to try to accomplish the same.
For sure.
And myself included.
That's what I love doing.
Absolutely.
Giving back. My shop is open Tuesday evenings.
Oh, wow.
Anybody who wants to come and make stuff. And I've had a little 10-year-old in here with bright, beady eyes and making a knife with his dad. It is such fun.
That is adorable. That is incredible. Okay, so if anybody is near Owen, what part of Texas are you in?
We're near Abilene.
Abilene. Okay.
Abilene, Central Texas, 2 hours west of Dallas.
All right. Go find Owen on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
He'll let you come hang out. That's amazing. All right, everybody.
Forge some stuff. All right. Thanks, Mareko. I look forward to, you'll be at Blade Show, won't you?
I will.
You're good.
I look forward to seeing you again.
Maybe drink a beer together.
I would love that.
That'd be great. Thanks so much, man.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.